Part 75. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dalby in the World. Chapter 741. Chapter 741. He actually agreed to divorce 3. Wang Tianyu looked at Jian Yuman and the others, the smile on his face became much gentler, and he said with a smile, "I cannot help you." "What? No more conscience? It is better to seek help from others than to seek help from yourself. It is better to find a solution by yourself." Jian Yuman saw the gardener in front of him sprinkling water. She walked over and asked the gardener to borrow a water pipe, facing Johnny. "Johnny, look at my evil eliminating holy water." The water from the water pipe in Jian Yuman's hand sprayed crazily towards Johnny. Johnny's pink and tender clothes were soaked in an instant, and he wanted to rush over to stop Jian Yuman from continuing to cause trouble, but the water was so strong that he couldn't open his eyes, and the force of the water was so strong that he could not move even an inch. In just a few minutes, Johnny changed from a delicate sissy to a drowned rat covered in water. "Ah, Jian Yuman, you bitch!" Johnny screamed and stamped on the spot. His beautiful clothes and elegant image were ruined. Kenny saw him. What was he going to do? Will Kenny not love him anymore? Dislike him? Jian Yuman had disappeared at this moment and successfully got rid of Johnny. Wang Tianyu, who witnessed everything, saw Jian Yuman's big belly and mischievous appearance. His eyes couldn't help but become gentle, and he looked at Jian Yuman's back as he ran into the house. Jian Yuman ran away for a while, covered her stomach with her hands and hid behind the door to see if Johnny was catching up. After making sure that Johnny was not catching up, she smiled and touched her belly and walked inside. At this time, Kenny handed over a towel, covered Jian Yuman's head with the towel, and gently wiped her wet hair. "You are hurting the enemy by 1,000, but you are hurting yourself by 800. You are even wet, and you don't know how to pay attention." When Jian Yuman sprayed Johnny, water splashed on herself. Her clothes were a little wet, her hair was wet, and her face was covered with water. Judging from the curve of the corners of her mouth, she looked like she was having a lot of fun. Jian Yuman chuckled. "I'm much better than Johnny. He must be shaking all over in the winter, ha ha ha. It is already the depth of winter now. Although the temperature here is relatively warm, around 10 degrees, it is still painful to get wet. She doesn't get wet much." Kenny shook his head and smiled helplessly, glanced at Johnny who was rushing in angrily, and gently pushed Jian Yuman, a pregnant woman with a big belly. "You'd better go change your clothes quickly and dry your hair to avoid catching a cold." Jian Yuman also caught sight of Johnny walking over, and immediately ran back to the room with one hand covering her stomach and the other supporting her waist. Kenny bent down and picked up the towel from the ground that he had just used to wipe her wet hair, with a slight curve on the corner of his mouth. Johnny rushed over in a state of embarrassment, only to see Kenny standing at the door, jumping like a frightened bird, covering his face or wet body with both hands. Ah! His perfect image was seen by Kenny. Jian Yuman is a little bastard, let's hope he doesn't teach her a lesson next time he sees her. With Kenny blocking Johnny at the door, Jian Yuman fled back to the room smoothly, dried her hair, put on clean and comfortable clothes, and went out with a big belly. As a fighter among pregnant women, Jian Yuman climbed mountains and ran in the early stages of pregnancy. In the later stages of pregnancy, with her huge belly, she could play with Johnny. Normally, people who are pregnant with twins will be almost 8 months pregnant. I don't even have the energy to walk around. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dalby in the World. Chapter 742. Chapter 742. He actually agreed to divorce 4. Jian Yuman is a fighter among pregnant women. Each of the babies in her belly is as strong as an ordinary fetus, so Jian Yuman's belly looks more swollen, but she can still run around. Many pregnant women will start to get nervous when they are about to give birth, but Jian is not at all. She has been very relaxed, not worried at all, and swayed all day long. Since Johnny's arrival, she has had no time to spare. She has to battle wits with him to win Kenny Appa's favor. During this period, Jian still lived a happy and carefree life here, but she always thought of Tanyuj when she dreamed about it at midnight. Sometimes she missed him so much that she wanted to put on her wings and fly to find him. She cannot communicate with the outside world or go out. She is a semi-imprisoned woman. No matter how much I miss Tanyuj, I can't see him. The longer she was away, the more she missed him. Nearly half a year has passed, and the anger that caused him to run away from home has faded to the point of being irrelevant. Although I still minded that Tanyuj didn't love her and that she had dated Murong 11, only after we were separated did we realize how reluctant she was to let go. It's been half a year, why hasn't Tanyuj found himself? She would shed useless tears just thinking about it. Fortunately, during this period of time, the little babies have been with her, feeling their squirming, and even interacting with her, so that her thoughts will not bother her all the time. When Jian went out, she happened to see Wang Tianyu holding a document in his hand. He went to the trash can and threw the document in. Originally, such a simple move would not attract Jian attention, but before going downstairs, Wang Tianyu stared at the document for a long time, frowning as if thinking about something, and finally chose to go downstairs. The somewhat troubled expression caught Jian attention. She walked over curiously and stared at the documents in the trash can for a long time in deep thought. Would you like to pick it up and see what he threw? Could it be a confidential document? Jian couldn't help but be curious, and finally picked the documents out of the trash can. Then he quickly returned to his room like a thief. She pulled the document out of the information bag and quickly glanced at the contents. The smile on his face froze when he saw the familiar information and slowly faded away. This is the divorce agreement. Moreover, her and Tanyuj's names were clearly written on it. She was very familiar with this divorce agreement, because she dumped it to Tanyuj and then ran away from home. Why did this information appear in Tianyu's hands? Jian breathing became tight, because a bad premonition emerged from her heart, and she quickly turned to the last page. When she saw the content on the last page, she couldn't hold the divorce agreement firmly and dropped it to the ground. Her eyes stayed on the divorce agreement, unable to look away, and kept staring at it, as if the divorce agreement in front of her would disappear from her eyes. Name, signed with Tanyuj's name, and her name also signed on it. She could tell at a glance that the signature belonged to Tanyuj, because he had the habit of signing with his left hand. The handwriting of the signature was Tanyuj's and could not be imitated by others. Ha ha ha, Jian suddenly smiled up to the sky, with a sad smile on his face, and tears rolled down his face uncontrollably. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 743. Chapter 743 He actually agreed to divorce 5. Ha ha ha, Jian suddenly smiled up to the sky, with a sad smile on his face, and tears rolled down his face uncontrollably. He actually agreed to divorce? He actually agreed. Jian murmured in despair, kneeling on the ground with her feet a little weak. He agreed to get a divorce, but he actually signed his name. Is he willing to give up on himself? He vowed at the beginning that he would never let her leave him, that he would never let her go in this life, but now? Sure enough, he couldn't wait to leave her. She dropped the divorce agreement and left, thinking that he would be as stubborn as before and insist on not letting her go. Unexpectedly, he just signed the divorce agreement after he dropped it. Does he really have no weight in his heart? She thought there was already a relationship between them, but he didn't notice it, but she didn't expect that he actually signed it. She said that she had been kidnapped by Wang Tianyu for almost half a year, but he still couldn't find her. She didn't believe that with his ability, if he really wanted to look for her, he wouldn't be able to find her. She was still hoping that one day when she opened her eyes, she would see him sitting by the bed, looking at her tenderly and telling her that he was here to pick her up. Now it seems that everything is her own fault. From the beginning, the person he loved was not him, and the person he was thinking about was not her. It's just that she was stuck in this marriage and wanted to find the taste of love from him. In fact, their marriage was a mistake from the beginning. It was a mistake for her to fall in love with him when she married him. Ha 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 ha. She, Qian Yuman, was going to stumble one day and was hurt by the man she loved. Divorce, divorce. Wouldn't she, Qian Yuman, be able to survive without him, Tang Yuj? Not working anymore? Okay. Qian Yuman was laughing and crying at the same time, looking very miserable. Johnny, who had just changed his clothes and came out, saw Qian Yuman sitting on the ground, laughing and crying, like a madman, in a daze. Johnny left and ran over, asking with concern. "Smelly bitch, what's wrong with you?" Qian Yuman slowly turned his head and cried like a child, grabbing his clothes and wiping the snot and tears from his face. Johnny's expression darkened a bit. His new clothes were so dirty. Johnny, who has a misophobia, is heartbroken. He shouldn't be so close. But when he saw Qian Yuman crying sadly like a child, he sighed helplessly and lent her his arm. She was already dirty from crying anyway. What happened? Wang Tianyu and Kenny came up after hearing the commotion upstairs. Seeing Qian Yuman's miserable look, the two looked at each other. Wang Tianyu's eyes fell on the papers scattered on the ground. He just glanced at them and immediately understood what happened. Kenny came over, squatted next to Qian Yuman, patted her back with concern, and asked softly, "What happened? Why are you crying so sadly?" Qian Yuman raised her head and threw away Johnny's arm in disgust, because a new arm had arrived. Her face was red, her eyes were red from crying, her face was covered with tears and snot, and she actually looked a little pitiful. It proves a sentence: a beautiful woman is beautiful even if she cries so much that she can't bear to look at her. Kenny Appa, that Tangyuj doesn't want us, mother and son anymore, woohoo. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 744. Chapter 744 Dystocia 1. Kenny Appa. That Tangyuj doesn't want us, mother and son anymore. Woohoo, Qian Yuman changed the owner of her arm. She just wiped the tears and snot from her face. If it wasn't enough, she would switch to another hand. Kenny's mouth twitched slightly, but he kindly lent his other hand to wipe her, and asked patiently, "What happened?" When Kenny asked this question, his eyes were directed at Wang Tianyu. Needless to say, it was definitely him who was behind the scenes. Wang Tianyu picked up the divorce agreement from the ground and silently told him what was going on. "I've obviously thrown it away, how can you pick up the trash?" Qian Yuman raised her head and stared at Wang Tianyu, and burst into tears. "I was abandoned by your brother, and he really wants to divorce me. Why is the divorce agreement in your hands? Did you know it a long time ago?" Wang Tianyu sighed deeply, looked elsewhere, and said with some melancholy, "I have known about it for a long time. I also got this divorce agreement from your lawyer. But don't worry, this divorce agreement has not been notarized yet, so it has no legal effect yet. You and Tangyuj still a couple." Qian Yuman felt even sadder and cried even more when she heard what he said. "So, he still wanted to divorce me, but he divorced me without hesitation. When lawyer Li came to get it, he gave it to him. He is a bastard. Woo. She is broken in love, she is divorced, and now she is a divorced woman. Does it matter whether it is notarized or not? He doesn't want the three of them, mother and son. Hey. In fact, I have been hesitant to tell you. After I got the divorce agreement, I kept it in my hand. I wanted to throw it away and pretend that nothing happened, but I didn't expect you to find out. In fact, you don't want a divorce. The divorce agreement is just a few pieces of paper, so you don't need to be so sad, Wang Tianyu comforted. Qian Yuman shook her head, sadly holding onto Kenny's arm and crying, and finally holding onto the fabric at his chest to cry. I know you are sad, but my elder brother is often very cruel to women. You know he doesn't love you, but you still get close to him. I brought you here this time, although part of it is because I want to get revenge on him, but later I found out that he seemed to be a normal person and it didn't have any impact on him at all. You and I have grown up together as neighbors. Seeing that you are still pregnant, I am afraid that you will be affected. So I borrowed some pretext to place you here to raise a baby. I originally wanted to wait until you gave birth before telling you, but I didn't expect you to find out on your own. Wang Tianyu sighed helplessly, spoke seriously, and slowly explained that everything he did during this period was actually about caring for her. After hearing this, Qian Yuman's mood not only did not improve, but got even worse. She cried even more uncomfortably. She could not even speak and was gasping for air. The pain in her stomach was so intense that she didn't even have the strength to stand up. The pain in her heart kept biting her, making her miserable. Her heart hurt like never before. She knew she was in pain because of Tanyu's cruelty. Suddenly I felt ridiculous, everything was so ridiculous. The sweet memories of the past were like a joke, mocking her. Okay, God, don't say any more. Kenny pursed his lips and had a sullen face. He interrupted unhappily and wanted to continue to say irritating words to Qian Yuman. Recommended ticket monthly ticket. Let's cheer for Manman together. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 745. Chapter 745 Dystocia 2. She still had some hope in her heart before, thinking that Tanyuj just couldn't find her for the time being, but now it seems that she has overthought everything. In his heart, the first person was not himself, and the person who existed in his heart was not her, but Murong 11. Faced with his request for divorce, he boldly signed his name and gave her a divorce. Let's face the reality, it's not worth being sad for this kind of man. Okay, God, don't say any more. Kenny pursed his lips and had a sullen face. He interrupted unhappily and wanted to continue to say irritating words to Qian Yuman. Qian Yuman's face turned pale, her breathing became more and more rapid, and her crying was not as loud as before. Kenny couldn't stand it anymore and stopped Wang Tianyu from uttering words that irritated Qian Yuman. Little funny boy, how are you doing now? I feel bad. Qian Yuman's body was shaking slightly. After Kenny's questioning, she also discovered that something was wrong with her body. Her stomach was getting more and more uncomfortable. She thought she was in temporary pain because she was too sad. Unexpectedly, the pain became more and more serious. It was so severe that she could no longer control her body and was shaking, and cold sweat was dripping from her forehead. The situation was very wrong. Wang Tianyu looked at Xiang Qian Yuman's painful expression, frowned slightly and squatted beside her, asking in a somewhat mixed tone. What's wrong? Is it painful? Qian Yuman nodded quickly, the pain in her stomach making it difficult for her to nod. Kenny has always been concerned about Qian Yuman's situation. When he saw that Qian Yuman's condition was a little out of control, and her lower body was even bleeding, he finally understood that the situation was very serious. Since he had spent a lot of time with Qian Yuman during this period, he had some feelings for Qian Yuman. The knowledge about pregnancy has become more popular, and when I look at Qian Yuman's condition, I know something is wrong. Not good. Send her to the hospital right away. She had a miscarriage. Kenny's face became solemn. Without hesitation, he got down, picked up Jian-Yuman from the ground, and ran downstairs quickly. Wang Tianyu's face was equally ugly, and he no longer hesitated to go to the garage to get the car. Johnny stood there stupidly, looking down at the pool of blood on the ground, and screamed in fright. "Thee is about to give birth? Hey! Is everything going to be okay? Why is there so much blood?" Jian-Yuman's situation was getting out of control, and her face was getting paler and paler. Wang Tianyu was sitting in the driver's seat and driving fast, with Kenny and Jian-Yuman in the back seat. Kenny held Jian-Yuman's head, letting her head rest against him, and gently touched her forehead with one hand to comfort her, asking her to relax. Jian-Yuman breathed heavily in pain. Her stomach hurt very much, but she couldn't exert any strength, and she was filled with fear that she had never felt before. The baby is about to be born in less than 8 months. This completely frightened the people in the car without any warning. Jian-Yuman could still run up and down before, but she didn't expect that she was stimulated by the divorce and had to survive in advance. The children were only over 7 months old and not yet full term. Originally, Wang Tianyu had hired an excellent gynecologist to deliver Jian-Yuman at any time. Unexpectedly, something unexpected happened, and now he could only take the baby to a nearby hospital for delivery. But Jian-Yuman's condition was really bad. She was born prematurely and was pregnant with twins, so there was a possibility of dystocia. Wang Tianyu drove faster and faster, almost racing against time. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 746. Chapter 746 Dystocia 3. Wang Tianyu drove faster and faster, almost racing against time. Jian-Yuman's condition was really bad. He was afraid that if he was 1 minute late, the lives of mother and son would be in danger. Wang Tianyu didn't expect that things would get so bad. He didn't dare to look into the back seat now, for fear of seeing Jian-Yuman's lifeless look. But Jian-Yuman's shouts came to his ears, which made his heart is heavy. At this moment, fear arose in his heart, fearing that Jian-Yuman would die before he could survive in the hospital. I have never been afraid before. Just now Kenny ran with Jian-Yuman in his arms and got into the car. Even the car smelled of blood. Jian-Yuman's white skirt was also covered in blood, staining Kenny's blue suit red. Dazzling images kept appearing in front of him, and he drove faster and faster. Ah! I'm going to die. Tangyuj, you bastard. If I die, I won't let you go even if I am a ghost, Jian-Yuman roared, tears streaming down her face in pain. How painful is it to give birth to a child? Kenny kept comforting Jian-Yuman. Seeing her in pain, he almost forgot to breathe. It wasn't until he discovered the lack of oxygen that he realized that he had forgotten to breathe. Little funny boy, it's okay, childbirth is something that every woman goes through. If you don't endure it any longer, you'll be in the hospital soon. Jian-Yuman kept screaming, tortured by unprecedented pain. Kenny! I'm dying. Jian-Yuman reached out and grabbed Kenny's hand and stuffed it into her mouth. Ah! Kenny's voice also shouted out. Of course, the sound was not louder than Jian-Yuman's. Wang Tianyu heard a man and a woman in the back seat making pig-killing sounds at the same time. No, it's time to give birth. Kenny had been paying attention to Jian-Yuman's condition. Naturally, he didn't miss the fact that Jian-Yuman's amniotic fluid in her lower body had broken and she was about to give birth. What? Upon hearing this, Wang Tianyu quickly looked behind him to see Jian-Yuman's condition, and he understood immediately. During this period, Wang Tianyu and Kenny treated the pregnant woman Jian-Yuman very well. They learned some knowledge about the birth of pregnant women by the way, and they were also educated on how to take care of pregnant women. With Jianyuman's strict requirements, professionals were invited to teach Jianyuman how to take care of babies. They were grown men. It was so boring to stand around, but I also learned some knowledge by the way. To put it in one sentence, a pregnant woman, several grown men have learned something, except Johnny who just came here. He doesn't understand anything, but everyone else knows it very well. After all, they are relatively smart and can learn without being special and concentrated. Of course, they have nothing to do and learn some by the way. So these grown men have a better idea of Jianyuman's situation than Jianyuman, a pregnant woman who is about to give birth. There were still nearly 5 minutes left before the hospital, and Jianyuman looked like she couldn't bear it any longer. What to do? Kenny was a little panicked. He didn't know what to do at all. "Mail the baby," Wang Tianyu shouted from the front. "Ah, me? A grown man? I can't," Kenny panicked. Wang Tianyu's face was dark and he shouted at his friend. "I'm driving, and there's only you behind me. You're not delivering the baby. Should I stop the car to deliver her?" Kenny looked embarrassed and hesitated whether to deliver the baby, but he had no experience. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 747. Chapter 747 Dystocia 4. Jianyuman, this pregnant woman is pale and her condition is already very bad. A child will be born at any time. Countless thoughts flew through my mind, but it only took 3 seconds to finally decide to deliver the baby. Kenny immediately took a pillow and put it behind her head, got her into a comfortable position, and came to Jianyuman's legs. Jianyuman bent her legs with some embarrassment, and then began to teach Jianyuman about childbirth. He was grateful that he had learned how to deal with emergencies when a pregnant woman was about to give birth. He still understood a little about childbirth, so he held Jianyuman's hand. "Little funny boy, follow my rhythm. I believe the little babies will be fine. You have to be strong." Jianyuman nodded crazily. She was so painful that she was about to cry to death. At this moment, Kenny was like a driftwood on the sea, and she was holding on tightly. "Breathe in," Kenny yelled loudly. Jianyuman inhaled at the same time. With force. Jianyuman pushed hard at the same time. Her face turned red, and she used crazy force to give birth to the 2 cubs. "You 2 bastards, I love your mother so much, come out now. See if I will hit you when you come out. Breathe in again." Jianyuman inhaled hard, and then harder, following Kenny's rhythm. Kenny, a big man, drives ducks to the shelves and becomes a midwife. And it still looks good. The baby comes out slowly. When he saw the head coming out and roaring, Kenny's handsome face turned red with excitement and he immediately started shouting. "Come on, little funny boy, the little baby is out, his head has already come out first, please work harder." "Ah!" Jianyuman roared heartbreakingly. She grabbed Kenny's hand again, stuffed it into her mouth, and bit it hard. She bit it with unprecedented strength and worked hard with her lower body. "Tangyuj, you bastard! It's out!" Kenny shouted in surprise. Wang Tianyu, who was driving, immediately turned around and saw a little baby appearing in Kenny's hands. Then a loud cry sounded, and Jianyuman finally took a breath, hearing the sound of the child's hooves with a happy smile on her face. Kenny held the baby in his arms, immediately took off his coat and held the baby in his hands, looking at Jianyuman happily. "Little funny boy, he is a little boy, very much like you." Kenny happily handed the baby to Jianyuman. Jianyuman looked at the baby in his arms and immediately complained in disgust. "Why is it so ugly? How do you know it looks like me?" Her child was actually so ugly. They had heard that the child was not good looking when he was born, but she did not expect it to be so ugly. She did not want to believe that this little baby was her child. Kenny actually said that the child looks like her. There he is. His face was all wrinkled. Kenny laughed like a fool, and then turned to Wang Tianyu like he was offering a treasure. Look, it's so cute. Wang Tianyu looked at the little boy in Kenny's hand who had stopped crying. The little boy stopped crying after crying twice. His eyes were closed and his mouth was pursed, as if he had fallen asleep. Except for the slow rise and fall of his chest, he would have thought that this little baby was stillborn. This kid has a bright future. He was actually born in a car and was delivered by me. He will definitely be very powerful in the future, Kenny said proudly, as if he gave birth to him. To him, he delivered the baby just as well. There is no difference in his life. Qian Yuman slowly adjusted her strength because she knew there would be a little baby waiting for her to be born later. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 748. Chapter 748, Protect the Big and Report the Small. 1. Her stomach still hurts, but it is a little better than before, but it is also good. At least give her time to breathe, otherwise she will have no strength after giving birth to 2 babies in a row. She just thought this, and pain in her stomach immediately came. With the experience of giving birth last time, Qian Yuman would not yell randomly, as that would only consume her experience. Kenny Appa, I seem to be giving birth again, Qian Yuman shouted in pain, which immediately made Kenny's face darken in excitement. He held the child with one hand and started delivering the baby with the other. The situation just now continued to occur. Just 5 minutes was so long. The Tang family's great-grandson was born, and there was a little baby still in Qian Yuman's belly. Screams sounded from behind. Qian Yuman repeated the previous birth process, but this time it was particularly painful. No matter how hard she tried, it was to no avail. No, maybe the umbilical cord is entangled. Kenny realized something was wrong. His face turned pale with fright, and he couldn't see the baby coming out. It stands to reason that after one birth, the second birth would be smoother, but this did not happen. Qian Yuman heard Kenny's judgment, the blood on his face faded, and fear appeared in his heart. She had lost her strength after giving birth to her first child, but now that she heard the bad news, all her strength was drained out of her body in an instant, and she couldn't use any strength at all. Kenny also panicked. Although he successfully received one, he did not get involved when the umbilical cord was entangled. He was not a professional midwife. At this moment, Wang Tianyu's voice sounded, and the car stabilized. Arrive. Wang Tianyu immediately ran out of the car, and Kenny also got out of the car. He first put his newborn brother into Wang Tianyu's hands, then immediately turned around and picked up Qian Yuman. Wang Tianyu called for the doctor while running. Qian Yuman was smoothly sent to the operating room. When Kenny entered the operating room, only Kenny went in. Wang Tianyu immediately handed over the premature baby to the nurse. The baby was born prematurely and they delivered it themselves, so they don't know what the situation is like. The children were very quiet when they came all the way here, neither crying nor fussing. After being sent to the delivery room, professional doctors immediately provided professional guidance. Kenny has been by his side. Qian Yuman's breath is getting weaker and weaker, and her strength is getting weaker and weaker. After a series of judgments, the doctor's face became a little dark. No, it's difficult to give birth. You are the father of the child. Do you want to keep the child older or younger? Kenny's eyes narrowed, and he immediately looked at Qian Yuman, who was breathing weakly. Hearing the doctor's words, Qian Yuman's pain instantly became indispensable. She couldn't believe that one day she would hear the whole sentence. Just now, her eldest son was born smoothly, but the younger one was unreasonable. Then her strength was gone and her speaking voice was weak, and as motherly nature dictated, she spat out softly. Small. Kenny heard Jianyuman's words, but ignored them. He immediately turned to the doctor and said seriously, "I am the child's father. I decided to keep her alive. No matter what, I can't let anything happen to her. Do you hear me?" Small Jianyuman insisted, frowning to resist Kenny's words. "Little funny boy, I promise you, don't waste your energy talking." Kenny criticized Jianyuman with a serious face, and then threatened with a threatening tone, but his eyes told the doctor that he must be big first. "Did you hear that? I want both big and small. If there is one less, I will tear down your hospital." End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dalby in the World. Chapter 749. Chapter 749, Protect the Big and Report the Small. 2. Little funny boy, I promise you, don't waste your energy talking. Kenny criticized Jianyuman with a serious face, and then threatened with a threatening tone, but his eyes told the doctor that he must be big first. "Did you hear that? I want both big and small. If there is one less, I will tear down your hospital." Kenny's threats are still very useful. The aura he exudes is not what ordinary people have. Born as the eldest son of the world's richest man, he has been surrounded by his father since he was a child. In addition, he has lived a high-ranking life like an emperor for so many years. The powerful aura on his body is usually restrained, but once it is released, just by raising his hand, it can shock people's hearts. What's more, his threatening words scared the doctor to death. Relying on the doctor's strong ability to withstand stress, he managed to survive and join the battle to save Jianyuman's mother and son. Jianyuman's breath became weaker and weaker, and she was filled with fear that she had never felt before in her heart. Tears fell uncontrollably. Her mind began to become illusory and she would fall into darkness at any time. Jianyuman's bad appearance was only as severe as Kenny's, and her handsome face was pale. He held Jianyuman's hand with both hands and cheered her up. "Come on, little funny boy. I believe you can do it. The baby will definitely be born smoothly. Don't give up." "Kenny, oh, ba, I have no strength." She felt so painful and sleepy that she wanted to close her eyes. At this moment, the doctor gave Jianyuman an injection. She was unconscious and her eyes began to wander. "For the sake of the little baby, you have to be strong. Come on, the baby's head has come out." Kenny lied without blinking, and the joyful expression on his face made Jianyuman really think that the child's head had come out. In order to encourage Jianyuman, Kenny chose to lie and cheer her up. Jianyuman's eyes brightened, and the injection the doctor just gave her was starting to take effect. She felt that her whole body was full of strength, and she slowly exerted herself. She didn't cry out no matter how painful it was. She wanted to save her strength to give birth to the baby. "Little baby, mommy will definitely come on and we, mother and son, will meet you soon." Jianyuman exerted all her strength with unprecedented strength, while Kenny cheered on her. Wang Tianyue, who was outside the delivery room, also wanted to come in, but was blocked by other doctors because there were too many people. He walked around anxiously outside, but he didn't hear the screams inside, which made him feel uneasy. "Manman, nothing will happen to you." Wang Tianyue prayed with his hands clasped together, his heart in his throat. She has been in there for so long, could it be? At this time, a nurse came out. When Wang Tianyue saw it, he immediately grabbed the nurse and asked, "How are the pregnant women inside?" Wang Tianyue asked, his voice trembling. "It's difficult to give birth. Both mother and baby may die at any time. You'd better be mentally prepared," the nurse said seriously and sadly. Hearing this, Wang Tianyue was so frightened that he squatted on the ground. The hesitation and helplessness of more than 10 years ago resurfaced in his mind. Manman is having difficulty giving birth. Mother and child could die at any time. This news was like a thunderbolt to him. Sadness quickly emerged in his heart, and he felt that the world was about to collapse. Just thinking about Jian Yuman's possible death from this world makes him fearful, scared and worried. Manman, I'm sorry. Regret appeared in his heart at the same time, and he covered his face with his hands in pain, wailing silently. This time, he was really wrong, very wrong. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dalby in the World. Chapter 750. Chapter 750. I fell in love with her. 1. The mistake was very outrageous. He thought that what he did was to retaliate against Tangyuj and torture him, but he didn't want to torture them and make him feel better at the same time. Injuring the enemy 1,000 times and damaging himself 800 times, he was equally tortured, even more painful than them. His mistake was that he had unknowingly expressed his feelings for Jian Yuman. His mistake was that he didn't hate Tangyuj as much as he thought. What's more, he hated that now, he actually began to regret a series of revenges. He shouldn't be soft-hearted, let alone have these thoughts, and he shouldn't regret it. All this has been his wish for many years. He just wants Tangyuj to suffer and avenge his father. Everything is obviously going on the right path, why is he so upset and feels cruel? He can't be like this, no. Tangyuj, you were right to kill your father, and you should not be benevolent as a woman. There is no way back for him. He destroyed their relationship and made Tangyuj suffer. Even if he lets go now, will they regret letting him go? No, if they knew about his revenge, they would not forgive him. Jian Yuman and the others treat him well now, but they don't know that the pain during this period was all planned by him, and their pain was all given by him. They will only regret it after knowing it. He shouldn't feel regret at this time. But God, can you not let Manman die? Please let their mother and son be safe. After everything calmed down, Jian Yuman in the ward was pale and breathing weakly, but it could be seen that she still had vital signs. Kenny outside the ward had a gloomy face, glaring at his friend Wang Tianyue, and punched Wang Tianyue hard in the face with both hands. Are you happy? Are you happy by doing this? Look at what you have done to Xiao Taobi, and you still can't let it go. Wang Tianyue, who was beaten to the ground in a circle, stretched out his hand to gently wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth, slowly stood up from the ground, looked at his angry friend opposite, and frowned in displeasure. God bless, let's stop. The little funny boy is also innocent. Kenny sighed deeply and persuaded helplessly and sadly. Innocent, Wang Tianyue sneered and shook his head slowly. Ever since she married Tangyuj, she has been part of my revenge plan. But she is also innocent. It was Tangyuj who killed your father back then, not Xiao Taobi. She also cared about you very much during this period. You obviously imprisoned her. Look at when she hates you. Look at you. Myself. She trusted you so much. What did you do to provoke her this time? She almost lost her life. It's not okay now, Wang Tianyue said in a calm tone. What if? If you don't survive this time, will you be happy? I think you will regret it for the rest of your life. Kenny pointed at his heart and pressed his friend. During this period, he had seen everything with his eyes and could no longer stand it. Jian Yuman almost died in childbirth this time, which completely woke him up. I believe Wang Tianyue was the same. Wang Tianyue stared deeply at his friend who was a little out of control. His face became more solemn, and he gritted his teeth and took a deep breath. Are you in love with her? Facing the question from his friends, Kenny neither denied nor admitted it. End of this chapter.